I love Palestinians. I love black people. In fact, I love all L00KINGs. But this is inappropriate behavior. After not allowing one of the Palestinian advocates to speak out on a DNC campaign, it was in that moment that some brothers and some other palm color people decided to mock the protesters that are protesting for the Palestinian cause. Yeah, sounds harsh, doesn't it? But one thing I want you to understand is that this discussion is not about race, and it's not about a black person behaving inappropriately to the Palestinian advocates. Because I know some creators out there want to make it about race, and they want to say, we told you so, we told you so. But the thing you gotta understand is that some palm colors were also at these protests, and they were seen even placing their fingers into their ear holes because they didn't want to hear the names mentioned of the watermelon children that got unalived in this conflict. As harsh as it sounds, it did happen. Just take a look at these videos for a moment.
Again, do it again.
As a person from the global south, when I first saw this video, I just had to turn off my phone and do something else. Like, I could not respond immediately because I felt sick. And I've stayed away from the recent discussion of Palestinians and black people and voting for Kamala because as a black person who's also from the global south, it is heated. But I feel like that video accurately explains why so many of us from the global south feel so frustrated with Americans, feel so exhausted, because you and your country are actively doing harm to us, and there's nothing we can do about it. And even when your country is actively doing harm to you, as well as the rest of us, a lot of you will decide to side with them anyway. Like, it makes me feel genuinely sick the way a lot of Americans view people from the global south. And I've lived in America for the past 6 years. I understand that there's not a lot you can do, but the bare minimum you can do is acknowledge the fact that this country is doing harm. The least you can do is not turn a candidate who is promising to do harm to the global south into a #girlboss haha meme. The least you can do is expect more. Even if you don't have more right now, don't justify the fact that you have to settle every single 4 years. Because they're killing you, they're killing us. And every time someone mentions that fact, someone says, well, at least they're not Trump. It doesn't matter at this point. When it keeps shifting and shifting and shifting, you will say, well, at least we have Trump instead of someone worse. Because at this point, I'm just exhausted. We should all want better than this. And you should not be getting angry at people for wanting better.
Let me tell you the story why this individual man was never successful, but was still considered as a hero because he sacrificed himself. Everybody knows the story of Nat Turner. But did you know that Nat Turner was a free slave? Yes, and you do your research. In his master's idea, he was free from restrictions, from living in a quarters that was a line aside with the master's house. Not inside the master's house, but inside. And he basically had to give reports to his master, okay? When he was young, the master saw light in him. And there was a preacher that always came to the master's house and said, why don't you train this slave to read to the other slaves and preach to the other slaves? And try to keep them motivated so that they can be cheerful slaves. So the master did that. And he also made a profit every time when Nat Turner went from plantation to preach the word. But Nat Turner kept on realizing that every single time he was reading the same chapter to people, and he looked at the faces amongst the people and knew that each and every one of them was not really feeling the word, because guess what? They lost hope, they lost integrity, they had a mindset that when are they going to be free out of the bondage? Now, Nat Turner was considered as Father Moses, but to be actuality, when he was reading the chapters, he found out that some of the concepts that they were teaching him about the Bible was misconstrued and misconcepted. So he turned around and started to break that and started preaching it. So one day he claimed that he had received an insight. But moving right with the story, when he started doing his rebellion, and he started to become successful at first, but guess what? It was always someone of our own environment that went and thought it was their right to go and inform the master of what was happening. So they set him up, and he was ambushed alongside with many others. They assassinated him. Rumors had it that they chopped up his body, And they basically, some said they ate him, some said they burned him, but his body was never found, according to sources. But they have a monument representing him and say that he was a hero. But deep down inside of his conception, he didn't believe, because he did not have a strong army and he did not really have the victory, but he started something. And when he did, and the rest of the people that was captured, they were hanged. He was able enough to be hanged honorably from a platform. Nat Turner did successful as far as starting the rebellion and making other people to have the insight that we no longer should be living in bondage, because we did not live in bondage. But why is it that we have people that look like us, may not be in our environment, and they feel like when they go to these things and be with the elites and the higher up, they always have to come in a concept to be a follower? To me, all they had to do was keep it moving. They didn't have to mock it. They didn't have to close their ears. They didn't have to make sound effects. They were calling it, this is what happened. During the DNC, the Democratic Convention, as they were exiting out of the Democratic Convention, there were protesters protesting about Palestine and giving a list of children. Each list of children were the ones who was no longer existed anymore. And then while they were calling the names through the bullhorns or saying it real, shouting out and whatever, you have a man like him pretty much mocking and laughing. One woman is closing her ears. Meanwhile, she has the rainbow coalition on her band-aid. But she's protecting the lives of LGBTQ, but can't even listen to the concept that they're still slaughtering and genociding Palestinians. And even through that protesting, is not only Palestinian alone. People in Congolese, Sierra Leone, and many other people, even in Haiti, as we speak, is still fighting.
So last night, as the DNC was ending, there were pro-Palestinian protesters outside as people were exiting the DNC venue. And they were reading the names of Palestinian children out loud, what sounded like a megaphone, as people were leaving the venue. And there was a wave of adults, people who would tell you that the Republican Party is the spawn of Satan and that they are the good guys, reacted like this as they were leaving the venue and as the names of them were being read aloud. I don't know, man. Sometimes it feels like these aren't the good guys either. And this coyote was the icing on the cake, literally laughing and mocking the protesters as they were reading these names aloud. This was some of the most dystopian behavior that I couldn't have fathomed seeing this. Like, leave the venue, walk out with your head down, put some headphones in, pretend you're on the phone. But this is crazy.
Just because you're not voting for Trump doesn't mean you're not a white supremacist. Seeing DNC attendees act in the same Islamophobic bigotry and Zionism that Israel has been doing, that the alt-right has been doing, and that every other Zionist across the world has been doing is not something surprising, because the DNC is comprised of white supremacist Zionists. Of you all have no fucking morals. Y'all will sit here and use progressive politics when it comes to white people. You'll humanize white neurodivergents, white queers, while actively bombing black and brown people all across the fucking world. And then you'll sit here, gaslight us, say it's something that's necessary, or politics are complicated, or the situation is complex, and not stop selling weapons. Y'all will sit here and listen to protesters demanding for a ceasefire and an end to the embargo sales that have been actively happening as of last week towards the occupation, the one deemed an apartheid. You'll cover your ears. You'll laugh in people's faces. Y'all are white supremacists. There's nothing different between you and the ones in white hoods. Y'all relish in this idea that you're fighting for your rights in America. So therefore, now you get to be the oppressor of everyone else. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what it costs. You'd be willing to throw everyone in the fight if you got a crumb of fuck. The fact that Palestinians in the uncommitted movement were denied from speaking at the DNC, but of course Israel were. And of course they use Zionist talking point, pretending that this idea of hostages for innocent civilians is something that making sense to anyone who has a shred of for human life. Knowing damn well that if Hamas is a terror, then the occupation is a terror group times a fuck. Knowing damn well that Israel tens of thousands of hostages illegally imprisoned without giving real representation, who've been actively tortured as confirmed by CNN, to the point where they're debating whether SAing Palestinian prisoners is moral. The fact that y'all will sit here and use the same talking point while everything being claimed is actively being done to Palestinians, whether it's in Gaza, whether it's in the West Bank, that's actively being settled more than it's ever been.
Did we all see this? Yeah, last night was night 3 of the DNC. And while protesters were outside reading a list of the names of children children that have been massacred in Gaza. And these people right here, get a good look at them, were all walking by the protesters that were reading the names of these massacred children, covering their ears, as you can see.
13 years old.
Say it again. Say it again. Lock them again. Lock the children again. Do it again. Do it again.
18 years old. 15 years old. Yusuf Hassan. 18 years old. Turn around and join the uncommitted militant.
Hey, Democrats, you should probably come get your ghouls. Did you hear that guy? The guy in the right-hand corner? He was saying 18 years old, mocking the protester that was reading out the names of the massacred children. And this guy right here on the right at the bottom rolled his eyes as he was walking by. Is there no better representation of the modern Democratic Party than walking by their own potential voters and protesters, laughing, rolling their eyes, and covering their ears? It's just all too on the nose. Cause yes, Blue MAGA, before you come into my comments and start slobbering all over the Democratic Party and making it your business to be the personal PR person for Kamala Harris, the reason why those protesters are there, the reason why the uncommitted movement is there, the reason why a bunch of Muslim leaders are there is because they are Democrats. They are people who, even if independent, vote Democrat in elections. So you would think, from a pure political standpoint, that you might actually want to get those voters. Because I've heard a lot of people go, why aren't you at Trump rallies protesting him? Why would they be? They're Democratic voters, or they're liberal, or they're somewhere on the left spectrum. They are people like me who are looking at these images and saying, yeah, you guys don't really want my vote. Because that's the message that you're sending to me with this nonsense. What you're telling me is that you do not care about my vote. This is on the heels of a movement where they have been trying to get a Palestinian American to be able to speak at the DNC, and the DNC has said no to them. But they let Zion come out and speak. These are parents of hostages that they had come out and speak. So they let them speak because they want to make sure that you view the hostages as human, but they don't want you to view what's happening in Gaza as a serious issue. That might put a damper on the whole DNC. And they clearly don't view the Palestinians as humans worthy of getting their voices heard, and they clearly don't value them in the Democratic Party, so they don't want them to talk. Muslim Women for Harris put out this statement on their Instagram last night. We cannot in good conscience continue Muslim Women for Harrison walls in light of this new information from the uncommitted movement that VP Harris' team declined the request to have a Palestinian American speaker take the stage at the DNC. The family of the Israeli hostage that was on the stage tonight has shown more empathy toward Palestinian Americans and Palestinians than our candidate or the DNC has. Devastating point.
So this discussion is not particularly about race, but it's a pity that even among black people, there are people that would behave in an inappropriate way. But you gotta know that even palm colors were at that protest, right? So it's not just about race, it's not just about that brother, but we all should be accountable and responsible in the way that we carry ourselves out, because other people are grieving. So we shouldn't forget our own grief in such processes or in such situations, because you gotta remember that everybody has suffered. Have we all forgotten about the unaliving of Sonia Masih? I know that we haven't, so that's that. Now let's take a look at the recent developments in light with the protest and everything that is happening currently. The protests at the Democrats' convention weren't as big and disruptive as some expected. Pro-Palestinian organizers predicted overwhelming turnout that would take their case directly to the demonstrations. Protesters gathered, but they didn't steal the show. And that is to say that they weren't as disruptive and as loud or violent as some people expected them to be. After months of anticipation, planning, and vows of mass protests in Chicago that called to mind the turnout of the 1968 Democratic National Convention, the demonstrators who challenged the Democratic Party over the conflict in Gaza remained largely in the background. And I guess people were surprised by that. While thousands of people joined enthusiastic daily protests in parks and on the streets of Chicago, a city with a deep history of protests, their numbers were fewer than organizers had hoped. All week, demonstrators chanted and marched near the convention site, angrily calling for a ceasefire and an end to U.S. aid for Israel, but failed to seriously disrupt the convention and its celebration of Vice President Kamala Harris, the party's presidential nominee. Though many demonstrators hoped that the convention organizers would grant the Speaker of Palestinian descent a chance to address the crowd, that request was ultimately denied. And I guess that pained a lot because we heard that somebody from the Israel community had spoken out. So just imagine the pain that the pro-Palestinian supporters felt. And the other thing that you gotta know is that there were fewer compared to the 1968 protesters that also demonstrated the same thing. Now, my concern and question is that, are we seeing fewer numbers because of the conversations that are going on involving the black community and the Palestinian community? Are black people finally just like sitting back and also not protesting, enlightened in favor with the Palestinians? I don't know, but you tell me. And after 4 days of protesters pushing to make the war in Gaza a focus of the convention, its final evening on Thursday ended with Ms. Harris directly acknowledging the suffering of Palestinians in Gaza and repeating calls for a ceasefire. But the thing is that also she centered her speech on discussions of abortion, access, immigration, and the record of our opponent. So as much as she did that, she also brought some light to the ceasefire in Gaza and the need for that, but she just basically focused on a political rally. There is some sort of war between what we are saying and what these politicians are willing to hear. An army veteran said at the pro-Palestinian protest on Thursday, lamenting that democratic leaders had mostly ignored the cries of protesters. So it's a pity that people are feeling this way. Now, on the last night of the convention, protesters acknowledged they were tired after days of demonstrations, but hundreds marched until 9 p.m. Organizers summed up the week on an optimistic note, pointing out that President Uncle Sam had mentioned protesters out in the street when he addressed the convention. Everything that is happening is very important for us to consider. And yes, as much as we know that we've had discussions about the watermelon community and their anti-blackness towards the black community, there's some sort of envy, hatred that they've had, right, throughout these discussions. Of course, that's true. But as much as that is true, we also should know that it is very important for awareness to come to the cause and to the conflict involving their people and the people of Israel. Right, because as much as we know that everything is going on and we're just doing like la 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 la, we're ignoring them, kind of like what we saw in that video involving that black brother and those palm color people. That's exactly what is happening if much awareness isn't coming to the situation, which is very painful, and in the process is gonna end up creating more enmity, because we gotta visualize the future here. If Miss Harris wants these pro-Palestinian supporters to vote for her, at least she gotta give a chance to one of them to speak out on her rally. What harm would that do? That's gonna be good for a political rally, of course. And the other thing is that as much as we know that watermelon people have oppressed people of African descent in the past, but we shouldn't take it out on them that way. Like, if we understand what they did to our people, or if we understand what these conversations have been going on about their anti-blackness towards black people, and we're trying to take that aspect of our hatred towards them, that's also not good. Right, because right now they are vulnerable and black people seem like they have the upper hand. Don't get me wrong, right? Because Kamala is a political leader representing black people. So in the eyes of the oppressed and marginalized, such as the watermelon community, they are viewing black people as more entitled and privileged. And what happened in history is that they oppressed black people because they were entitled and privileged, right? The watermelon people were entitled and privileged, right? So they've done that oppression in the past. Even European colonizers did so because they were more entitled and privileged. Or right now, as it seems like somebody from the black community is representing the black community, that shouldn't be that way. At least that's the reason why we were talking about some of these things in the other video that we did about bringing awareness to this. Black content creators and Palestinian content creators talking about this more and educating their communities about the importance of solidarity and unity, as well as acknowledging past wrongs so as to build a new relationship. Or at least I see that this is how things are supposed to be. Because even if Kamala wins in this situation, the watermelon community is still gonna have that hatred towards black people. And this relationship may never be established again. If the Trump train wins, the same thing is likely to happen, right? The hatred is still gonna further exacerbate and continue. But you can leave your thoughts in the comment section and tell me what you think. I'll see you in the next video. Please like, share, and subscribe.